Hello everyone, this is PK Entertainment and we are back again. And we're going to talk boxing now, and it's been recently announced that the heavyweight champion Anthony Joshua, who currently holds the IBF, WBO and WBA heavyweight titles, is going to be fighting Kubrat Pulev, the established boxer from Bulgaria. This fight is going to take place on June the 20th of this year at Tottenham Hotspur Football Stadium, which holds a capacity close to 70,000. So this is a high profile fight. The first of Joshua's fights since regaining his belts from the rematch against Andy Ruiz back in Saudi Arabia on December. So, thoughts on this fight? No real problem with it. It's a mandatory challenge, and that's what you would expect from an established champion. You want them to fight the mandatories. I've always believed that the established champion should either be fighting for undisputed or unifications or mandatory challenges. So, no problems here. I don't think anyone can really criticise this fight. Pulev, he's an established champion. His current record is 29 fights, of which he's had 28 wins. He's had 14 knockouts and 1 loss on his record, which was to Vladimir Klitschko. So no real shame there. Vladimir Klitschko, as we know, dominated the heavyweight scene for near enough 10 years and is a future Hall of Famer. So no shame in there. So Kubrat Pulev himself, you know, he's a decent boxer. He's quite resolute. He's about 6'4". He's got decent power, decent strength. Not too much in terms of his speed as such. There's no real awesome power that he has in his game. He's just what you would call an adequate, resolute boxing challenger. You know, he's been around the scene for a long time. As I said, he's had recent fights against both Hughie Fury, which he did win. Hughie Fury, again, really didn't do enough to take the fight away from Pulev. Again, he fought Chisora as well, which he had a convincing win over there as well. So Pulev is someone who I think may cause a bit of trouble in the first early rounds, but I think once Joshua gets a grip on the situation, I think we're going to probably see stoppage. I'd say maybe around the 10th round, maybe the 9th round. Now, in the past, before the first loss against Ruiz, I would have easily said Joshua's going to knock this guy in about 4 or 5 rounds. But post the Ruiz fight and everything that happened, I think Joshua now is going to be a lot more circumspect, if you like, of how he approaches his opponents. It doesn't matter whether it's a Wilder or a Fury or a Kubrat Pulev. He now knows he can't take any opponent lightly. He's got to take every situation on its own merit as it comes. Okay, it's his heavyweight boxing. You could get knocked out any time. Pulev is strong enough to produce a punch similar to what Andrew Ruiz did, which was, as we know, behind the head or behind near the ear of Joshua, which, as we know, upsets a fighter's balance and can really sway the fight in your opponent's direction. Kubrat Pulev is good enough to do that. So Joshua is going to be very aware. I'd expect we're probably going to see a very similar performance to the Andrew Ruiz second fight, when Joshua, again, he's a taller man. He's going to use his height. He's going to use his range. He's going to keep moving Pulev around the ring. But he will assert himself, I would say, a lot more in this match than what I think we saw in the Ruiz rematch. I don't think there's as much pressure on this fight as what there is on the Ruiz first match, where it was his American debut, and the fact that Wilder had just recently knocked out Brazil, and there was this whole back and forth between AJ and Wilder. And Joshua felt that he had to kind of one up or match the knockout in the first round that Wilder did against Brazil against Ruiz. We saw that the way he come out and was quite aggressive, and he did knock Ruiz down. So, you know, he's got that capability to do that against Pulev. But I just think we'll see him produce more of a boxing performance first before going in for the kill later on. So he was actually due to fight Pulev way back a couple of years ago, but if you remember, Pulev was injured, and then that's when Joshua had to fight Takam. You know, when he fought Takam originally, that was meant to be Pulev's place. So Pulev has had this RBF mandatory shot for quite some time now, and he's had various injuries and breaks away from the game. So he hasn't been able to fulfill this mandatory the way he would like to. But there was also, for anyone that doesn't know, a huge kind of controversy at the time that Pulev was involved with a boxing journalist called Jennifer Alvaro, or she has a nickname sushi, and essentially what happened was there was an interview that they did post one of his fights, and this footage is all over YouTube. If you just search for Kubrat Pulev controversy, you can see it, where basically he kissed her as they were doing the video interview, which, you know, is inappropriate for any sportsman when they're conducting an interview. Well, she later on claimed that basically he had groped her and was putting charges forward for sexual assault. The news broke out about that, and then shortly afterwards, footage came out of her going to Pulev's private kind of parties. He sat there along with his friends and his other entourage. There's a couple of other reporters there, and then you then see this journalist kind of lap dancing or sitting on the lap of someone of Kubrat Pulev's entourage, and she's basically saying or asking him not to film the footage. So once that footage came out, it kind of really discredited her and her case that she put forward against Kubrat Pulev. She went to this famous lawyer who's got a famous reputation, Georgia Aldred, I think her name is. She has a famous reputation of trying to put forward these cases of sexual assault towards females. There was this whole debate about the whole Me Too argument back and forth, and Kubrat Pulev actually had to serve a suspension at the time, and he also had to go through some sort of rehabilitation or program where he had to check in every now and again and prove that he won't provide these misdemeanors in the long run in the future. So that's a kind of sort of background overall on Kubrat Pulev and why we haven't really seen this IBF mandatory come forward in the future. So I mean, that's all been done and dusted now. There's no real kind of further discussion on that issue now. Pulev's here, he's ready to fight, you know, all systems go. Like I said, it's a mandatory challenge, there's no worries here. People may criticise the fact that why aren't we seeing negotiations for the Fury fight, but as we know, Deontay Wilder has reactivated his rematch clause for a third fight against Tyson Fury, so they had to go forward with this mandatory. They held off announcing it because they wanted to see what would happen with the rematch clause against Wilder, because if that didn't happen, then we may have then seen them into negotiations with Tyson Fury to get this undisputed fight, for which everybody wants to see. I believe that's the biggest fight in boxing right now, but we have to put that on hold for now while Joshua fulfilled his mandatories. No issues there. Like I said, I'm predicting a 9th to 10th round stoppage or knockout from Joshua. I just don't think Pulev has got enough in his armoury to really trouble Joshua consistently over a set amount of rounds. But again, just like the Ruiz fight, we always now have to approach this with an increased kind of take on that maybe Joshua could lose. Joshua is susceptible, he is vulnerable, there's no doubt about that. So yeah, there's always more of a chance that Pulev could pull up the upset here, but I would doubt it. I would doubt it very much. I'd be very surprised but not overly shocked if he did pull off the win on here. So that's really it to cover this fight really. If Joshua does win, it really depends on what happens with the third Wilder and Fury fight, as whether we could see an undisputed fight at the end of the year. Most likely, I'd say December. Joshua now, he only fights twice a year now. You know, June, July, and then December. So we'll need him to beat Pulev convincingly, and then hopefully, if Fury were to beat Wilder again, or even if Wilder to beat Joshua, I mean Fury again, then maybe we could see the undisputed further down the line. But again, we're going to focus on this mandatory challenge against Pulev, and we'll see how he gets on that. You know, again, they went for a big stadium in the UK. There were initial talks, they were trying to fight abroad, because essentially they couldn't get the money to pay both fighters in the UK. As we know, when it's a mandatory, you have a certain split. It's normally about a 75-25% split in favour of the champion when you have a mandatory, and you have to fulfil those obligations. And of course, there's no rematch clause in the mandatory fights. So it will be interesting to see what would happen if Joshua did lose to Pulev, what would they do then? So those are my thoughts on this fight here. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Are you excited for this fight? Are you more critical of it, or are you more accepting of the fact that it's a mandatory obligation Joshua has to fulfill? He has 3 belts, so he's going to have plenty of mandatory shots to fulfill going forward in the future. Again, this is why we always emphasize that you have to make these unifications and undisputed fights as soon as possible, because otherwise, if you don't, you're going to have a huge backlog of mandatory challenges that you have to face. So those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I'll comment a lot more on the third Fury and Wilder fight, and also Dillian Whyte and Povetkin very shortly. But let me know what you think for now. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you very soon.